My colleague Gaurav Sawant is going to be taking you through the rest of the broadcast as he joins us live from Sri Lanka. Gaurav, the presidential polls kickstart today. I'm going to throw straight across to you for all the very latest. Take it away.
Hello and welcome to an India Today special broadcast that comes to you from Colombo. I'm Gaurav Sawant. This island nation is in turmoil. As political temperatures soar, the battle lines very clearly drawn for the presidential elections on the 20th. The presidential elections extremely crucial, but who will that president be who can steer Sri Lanka out of this crisis? Ranil Wickremesinghe, Sajith Premadasa amongst the four candidates seen as front runners, but are they acceptable to the masses? Right now, we are outside the presidential secretariat. We are also getting you the latest from ground zero on this big story. Let's now talk about what's happening here in Sri Lanka. The presidential elections to be held on the 20th of July. Acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe, main opposition leader Sajith Premadasa, they are amongst the four front runners in this presidential battle. Members of the Sri Lankan Parliament met briefly on Saturday. It was a brief session where first they announced that Gotabaya Rajapaksa has stepped down. He's fled the country and that the new presidential elections will be held on the 20th of July. Sri Lanka's former Prime Minister and acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe and main opposition leader Sajith Premadasa are amongst the four leaders who've come to fight this presidential elections. The biggest reason for the political crisis in Sri Lanka was the economic crisis caused by a number of government policies. There is an acute shortage right now, even as we speak, of food and fuel. There's rising inflation. Sri Lanka, a country of 22 million, virtually on the streets looking for a solution to a crisis that could only escalate. Things set to become worse before they improve. Now, let me now describe to you what is happening on ground here in Colombo. This is the struggle square, the Janata Alagadia, as it's known as the people's struggle. Now, some of the leaders of the struggle, like this young lady here, now the t-shirts that they wear, the clothes that they wear, that's all about the struggle. Tell me your name. You're one of the people who are struggling for what?
Well, we are struggling for the freedom, and we want to have our country back, and we people want, our rights and our freedom. That is why we are.
What's your name? What do you do?
I'm actually Niluka. I'm from down south. I am a teacher. Actually, I'm a primary teacher. I'm here because I want my children, my students, my pupils to have a better future. And with this government and with these people who are in power, I don't think we can have that right.
A school teacher. Come, let's just walk around, and I want our viewers to see what is happening here. As we walk around, we will show you the struggle square. You've been struggling here close to 100 days, am I right?
Yes.
This is the 100th day.
Yes, today is the 100th day, and now we are just, celebrating our freedom, and but we are still fighting because we don't know who will be the, what will the president in action will do next, whether he'll be the same like our ex-president or he'll, do some different. We still don't know what's going to happen next, so we are waiting till he, come and talk to the people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, youngsters, a large number of youngsters, they've taken over this road and they're protesting. There are patriotic songs that are playing almost throughout the day and night on this road. Before I get you much more from this protest square, I want to cut across to India Today's Ashutosh Mishra, who joins us live. And Ashutosh, right now, the people are really suffering in Sri Lanka, whether it's food crisis, fuel crisis, and no one seems to have a solution in mind.
Absolutely. You know, what we are saying, that political crisis perhaps may end soon, maybe just in 4 or 5 days. But the biggest question is that, is there a roadmap, is there a blueprint to resolve the economic crisis? Because that was the trigger point, that was perhaps the reason why this political turmoil began in the island. For example, at these petrol pumps, you have also seen how the lines are not just barely few vehicles, few hundred meters. Sometimes it is just more than a couple of kilometers. And this is situation we are seeing in the capital city. At this airport, where the petrol fuel pump where I am, these images that I'm beaming through, these are the Navy commandos. Now remember, those who are protect the territory, in the ocean, these Navy commandos are deployed at the petrol pump to manage the law and order. This is not their duty. Air Force commandos who have to protect, their territory are deployed at the fuel stations. Army, special forces, everyone managing the local law and order situation. The situation has gone totally out of hand. Now, fuel becomes the very essential, as this is the, it collapses entire infrastructure, entire supply of chain. What we know that Colombo, the Sri Lanka, the remote parts where they produce rice, they produce coffee, several other things which is being produced in Sri Lanka are unable to reach to the capital and several other parts of the country because of the transportation. Now somehow the government is trying to manage the diesel, but when it comes to the forex that totally been exhausted, several billions of dollars the products have still stuck up at the ports because the government and several private companies are unable to pay the import duties, the bills for those things. So clearly, there are several hurdles when it comes to bringing back the economy on the track and again get the business back on track. So those challenges, who and how will be addressed, remains the major question. What I'm hearing from people, protesters, they have been telling for over the week that we will give a new government time for 6 months. If there is no, resolution to this major crisis, perhaps the island will see, one of the worst that it hasn't seen even till now. Gaurav.
Okay, stay with me for a moment. Before I talk to more people on ground, I quickly want to take our viewers with the latest as far as the situation is concerned. Tourism has collapsed. There's no food. There is no fuel. People are standing in long queues. And the collapse of tourism is having a major impact. A lot of this is also being blamed on policies of President Rajapaksa. It's being talked about very extensively. But take a look at this report on the collapse of tourism and the impact on this country.
Out of the 22 million people, the voters who have reached the age of voting are allowed to choose their president. Right now, what we have is 225 parliamentarians choosing the president. And this parliament composes of Gotabaya Rajapaksa's legislative majority. So it is from that particular composition that the president will be chosen. I have put my name forward. We'll wait and see what happens.
So Sajith Premadasa very clearly saying that he's in the fray to be president of Sri Lanka. Now, as far as the people are concerned, and we've been speaking to these youngsters are actually the face of the struggle at this point of time. Now, when you talk about what the presidential elections will somebody like a Ranil Wickremesinghe or Sajith Premadasa be acceptable for the struggle?
Well, we don't know about that. We don't care about those politicians, whoever that come to power. We don't care about them. We need our rights. We need what we need to be,
But what are the rights that you are looking for that's not available?
Well, it's our, the people who are in power, those 225, they have so much more than they should have. If you have been to the President mansion and PM's office, you could have seen those luxury things they have. I mean, why only that's something like so luxury things and places only for them? Why can't we have it? Why can't we are the one who vote for them, and we are the one who make them go into the parliament and have whatever they have in their life? So why not we can have it? Why can't we have it? I mean, we don't want luxury life. We want free country where we can live the way we are with our rights. Like we are also human. Yeah.
We want to be a genuine democracy is what these people argue. Their struggle, the Janta Aragaraya, if I'm pronouncing it correctly,
Yes, yes.
the people's struggle is all about rights for the masses. And this is a country, especially when people went into the presidential palace and when the Prime Minister's house was set on fire. One, anarchy is always wrong, but they say just look at the wealth differential between how the president and his family were living and how the common masses are living on ground. We bring you this report.
Serpentine queues. Fight for fuel. Anger mounting. Sri Lanka, which is reeling under political and economic crisis, is facing an acute shortage of fuel and other necessities. In the capital Colombo, people have been waiting for days, standing in line to get fuel, and their frustration is evident.
The iconic Marine Drive in Colombo, the capital of Sri Lanka. Usually this place is bustling with tourists, especially this time of the year. You have the ocean on one side and a large number of five-star hotels on the other. But what you see right now are just very, very long queues for fuel. People have been standing not for several hours, but for several days waiting for fuel.
More than actually 2 days. This is actually result of our government stolen people's money.
Have you also been waiting for 4 days, 2 days already in a line?
2 days. Yeah, 2 days.
It's been 2 days.
The Sri Lankan government, which is virtually leaderless, awaiting election of a new president, says it is doing everything possible to mitigate the crisis. To tackle the fuel shortage, the government is introducing a quota system. Under the scheme, the government will allocate a guaranteed quota of weekly fuel per vehicle on one national ID card. A QR code will be allocated once the vehicle chassis number and details are verified. The fuel will be allocated 2 days of the week on the basis of the last digit of the number plate. The government says the scheme will curb black marketing, hoarding, and will permit equal distribution of fuel for the people. The island nation has also launched a probe into the violence inside the presidential palace that caught the attention of the entire world.
These are the valuable items were being protected by the STF even on the day of violence. Protesters could not enter inside. Look at these. Elephant teeth. These are the most precious and valuable items. Now, the forensic team which is investigating the entire violent scene, we are inside here. And now the STF has taken over the presidential palace since the protesters vacated. The valuable items are being counted and all the evidences are being collected.
India, which pledged a massive relief to its neighbor in its hour of crisis, is being hailed by the citizens of Lanka.
The other country, and they are helping us a lot, and I'm just thanking them so much. And we know that we are having a big problems, and always they support us when we are struggling. So thank you so much for that.
The Lankan crisis could spark immigration issues in India. Several Sri Lankans have fled their land and tried to enter India illegally. They were detained and shifted to a refugee camp in Rameshwaram. Since the crisis began, over 100 Lankans have tried to enter Indian territory. The island parliament has started the process to elect a new president after the exit of Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who remains defiant, saying that he served his motherland to the best of his ability. Violent protests have stopped, but Sri Lanka is still far from normalcy. With Gaurav Sawant and Ashutosh Mishra in Colombo, Bureau Report, India Today.
So what brought Sri Lanka to this pass, to this situation? Many argue that it's some kind of toxic masculinity which was practiced, which was followed by the Premadasa, by the Rajapaksa government. Clearly not. This situation has many layers to it, multiple layers. Now when you look within, what led to this? Well, you had a situation where a lot of vanity projects which had absolutely no bearing on returns on ground, they were undertaken. Hambantota Port, Hambantota Airport, other Chinese projects where loans were taken, high rate of interest and no financial returns. One part of the story. The country is suddenly deciding to go organic. Now, while that step is a very good step to go organic, but it needs to be done, as some analysts argue, in a very systematic manner. You have to wargame it, you have to see the pros and cons, you have to see return on yield and so many other aspects. So whether it is tea or cardamom or so many other, including rice, things that Sri Lanka consumes and exports, all of that just collapsed and there wasn't enough organic compost or fertilizers coming in. Fertilizers are now starting to come in, but the agricultural produce, it collapsed. Now, many argue because the president was so powerful that there weren't enough naysayers in his government. There weren't enough people who could talk about the pros and cons. They couldn't talk about how the economy was in tailspin in more ways than one. Then, of course, after the 2019 Easter church attack, tourism dipped. In COVID, it collapsed. It was only this year that there was hope that tourism would revive in a big way. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. This crisis escalated, and now the situation is so bad that it is being argued that this country may not have foreign exchange by the end of this month. We bring you this report.
So what really led to the downward spiral of what was once known as the island paradise? The country is marred by its worst economic crisis since 1948. Experts blame the Rajapaksa government for mismanaging the government finances and ill-timing tax cuts. The current crisis was accelerated by deep tax cuts promised by Rajapaksa during a 2019 election campaign. Now, these tax cuts were enacted months before the COVID-19 pandemic, which literally wiped out parts of Sri Lanka's tourism-dependent economy. The war in Ukraine hurt supply chains, putting more pressure on an already pressurized economy. Huge piles of foreign debt, series of lockdowns, soaring inflation, shortage in fuel supply, fall in foreign currency reserves and devaluation of currency has adversely impacted the country's economy. The Rajapaksa government is now unable to pay for essential imports, including fuel, leading to debilitating power cuts. Ordinary Sri Lankans are also dealing with shortages and soaring inflation of medicine, of food, of fuel, and of pretty much literally every daily necessity. The country's foreign debt rose from a meager $0.4 billion in 1970 to a whopping $56.3 billion in 2020. The trouble was that the country's external debt rose quicker than its GDP. The external debt to GDP ratio rose from 31.6% in 2010 to 32.4% in 2015 and further to 40.4% in 2020. The foreign reserves in Sri Lanka in 2018 were near $10 billion and this nosedived to under $2 billion in 2021. On the other side, the Sri Lankan rupee has depreciated more than 50% against the US dollar in this 1 year alone. The Sri Lankan rupee has now depreciated against the Indian rupee by 32%, against the euro by 31%, the pound sterling by 31%, the Japanese yen by 29%, all between January 1st and March 31st. This comes as statistics according to the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. So what next now for Sri Lanka? It seems like the country is seeking financial support from the IMF and turning to regional powers that may be able to help. Sri Lanka has requested help from China as well as with India. New Delhi has already issued a credit line of $1 billion in March. Uncertainty still prevails on what comes next.
And Sri Lanka's energy minister has said that as this fuel crisis intensifies, they've asked for help from several countries, including China, Russia, other countries and India. He said, the Sri Lankan minister says, so far only India has helped. And as we wrap up, what has India's role been in this crisis, according to you?
Well, they were a big helping hand when we needed money and, you know, fuel and gas and all those stuff. But as I've heard that they have asked some kind of, you know, some things like not money, but in return what they are giving to us.
Okay.
Like I've heard some kind of, they have signed some kind of contracts around Sri Lanka, like a piece of,
Okay.
land.
So there is a lot of
Yeah.
I have heard.
Yes.
How?
Like I have seen as per the news.
Okay.
News, yeah.
Okay, so India is a helping hand, but then that lurking suspicion, as some of the protesters argue, that continues, and we'll be getting much more, and that is why a lot more transparency is always helpful, so that the rumor mill does not churn over time. That is all that we have for you on this special broadcast from Colombo. Many thanks for watching.